The night was quiet on the human colony world. The wind carried dust across the empty ground, and the stars above looked like silver eyes watching from the dark sky. Inside the settlement, most people were already asleep. But one man was still awake. His name was Daniel. He was an engineer, someone who fixed machines and built tools. His workshop stood near the edge of the colony, filled with the smell of oil and the soft hum of machines resting. Daniel often worked late at night, repairing broken devices or designing something new. That night he was about to close his workshop when he heard a sound. It was faint at first, a soft cry, not the wind, not the noise of metal, something different, something alive. Daniel froze, his heart beat faster. He stepped outside, his boots pressing against the dusty ground. He listened again. Yes, the sound came again, a small, weak cry like someone calling for help. He followed the sound past the fences of the colony into the darker fields. His lamp cut through the shadows, showing strange rocks and long alien grass swaying in the breeze. The cries grew louder. Daniel felt both fear and curiosity. Who could it be? Why here at night? Then he saw it. A small figure lay near the base of a broken tree. The light of his lamp fell across a body that was not human. The creature was curled up, trembling. Its skin glowed faintly, pale with a strange shimmer. Its head was shaped differently, larger eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. Daniel gasped. It was a child, an alien child. The child's breathing was uneven, fast and shallow. Its left arm was badly damaged. Torn, broken, almost gone. Blood or something like blood, dark and thick, stained the ground. Daniel's first instinct was fear. He looked around. Was this a trap? Were there more of them hiding in the dark? But no, the place was silent. Only the weak cries of the child filled the night air. He stepped closer, his voice soft. Hey, easy. I'm not going to hurt you. The child flinched, eyes wide with fear. It tried to move away, but the broken arm made it collapse with a cry of pain. Daniel knelt down. His hands shook as he reached for his medical pack. He had seen many injuries before, but nothing like this. The wound was deep and the alien's body was not like a human's. Still, one truth was clear: without help, the child would die. I can't leave you here, Daniel whispered. His voice carried both worry and determination. He pulled out bandages and wrapped the injury carefully. The child whimpered, but after a while its breathing slowed. Its wide alien eyes stared at Daniel. Fear was still there, but also something else. Hope. Daniel lifted the child gently into his arms. It was lighter than he expected, fragile, like glass. He carried it back to his workshop, each step heavy with the weight of an impossible decision. Inside, he laid the child on a clean table. His machines hummed again as he turned on the lights. He studied the broken limb. The damage was too great. No natural healing could restore it. Daniel pressed his hands against his head. What do I do now? How do I save you? The child watched him quietly, tears on its strange, glowing skin. Its lips moved, whispering sounds in a language Daniel did not know. But the meaning was clear. It was begging not to be left alone. Daniel felt a strange fire inside his chest. He had come to this colony to build machines, not to become a hero. But at that moment he knew he could not walk away. He stood, breathing deeply. He walked to a cabinet and opened it. Inside were pieces of metal, wires, small motors, half-finished designs. His mind began to race. He was an engineer. If nature could not fix the limb, maybe he could. He turned back to the child and spoke softly. I don't know if this will work, but I will try, I promise. The child blinked slowly, eyes shining with faint light as if trying to trust him. Daniel rolled up his sleeves and powered up his tools. Sparks danced. Metal rang. His hands moved quickly, guided by both skill and desperation. He would craft something not for humans, but for this fragile alien life. The night grew deeper. The world outside was silent. Only inside the workshop, one man and one child fought against fate. The machines whispered, and hope was being built piece by piece. Daniel did not know who this child was, where it came from, or what dangers would follow. But he knew one thing. He could not let it die. And so, in the quiet shadows of the night, the story began, with a human choosing to save a stranger, no matter the cost. The workshop was alive with sound. Tools whirred, sparks flew, and the smell of heated metal filled the air. Daniel's hands moved quickly, yet with care. His mind raced with ideas, designs, and doubts. He was not a doctor. He was not a soldier. He was just an engineer. But right now, none of that mattered. A life was in front of him, and it depended on what he could build. The alien child lay silently on the table, weak but awake. Its large eyes followed every movement. Sometimes it winced when Daniel checked the ruined limb, but it no longer tried to pull away. There was fear in its gaze, yes, but also trust beginning to grow, fragile like a candle in the wind. Daniel paused and wiped sweat from his brow. "This isn't easy," he whispered to himself. "But maybe it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to work." He pulled out old scraps of machinery, small motors, flexible tubing, polished metal joints. Years of tinkering had left him with boxes of unused parts. Tonight they would find purpose. The design Daniel sketched quickly on a piece of scrap paper. A simple arm, strong enough to lift, flexible enough to bend, wires to act as tendons, a small energy cell to power the joints. Nothing elegant, but functional. He glanced at the child. "I'll make you something. Not beautiful, but it will let you move again." The child tilted its head as though it understood the tone, if not the words. Its glowing skin flickered faintly like a pulse of light. Daniel took that as encouragement. "The work begins." He began shaping the metal frame. Sparks leapt as his cutter sliced through steel. The sound echoed in the small room. The child flinched at first, but soon settled, eyes wide with fascination. Daniel filed the edges smooth. He drilled holes for joints. He attached thin rods, creating the skeleton of the limb. Piece by piece, it took shape. "Like building a puzzle," Daniel muttered. His voice steadied him. "A puzzle that might save your life." He added wires for movement, connecting them to small motors. He tested each one. The fingers opened and closed, stiff but working. The wrist turned slightly. The elbow bent. A rough mechanical hand now existed where only scraps had been before. Daniel stopped and stared at it. His chest tightened. What if it failed? What if attaching it only caused more pain? He looked at the child again. The alien's eyes were half closed, its body weak, but it was still watching him. There was no anger, no fear now, only quiet hope. Daniel clenched his fists. "I can't fail you. Not tonight." Attaching the limb, he prepared the table. His hands trembled as he brought the frame closer. The child whimpered, sensing what was about to happen. Daniel's voice softened. "I'll be careful. I promise." He worked slowly, fitting the mechanical frame to what remained of the broken limb. The connectors clicked softly into place. He tightened bolts, adjusted wires, and sealed the base with medical adhesive. The child cried out once, a sharp sound of pain, but Daniel did not stop. He whispered calming words, even if they were meaningless to the alien's ears. His hands moved with desperate precision, driven by both fear and determination. At last, he stepped back. The new limb was attached. Metal gleamed under the workshop lights. The test Daniel's heart pounded. "Try. Move it," he said softly, gesturing to the arm. The child stared at the strange creation. Slowly, hesitantly, it tried. The fingers twitched. A joint whirred. The elbow bent. For the first time since Daniel found it, the child's eyes widened, not with fear but with wonder. The glowing skin pulsed brighter. The small hand opened, then closed. It worked. Daniel let out a shaky laugh, half relief, half disbelief. "It works. You can use it." The child lifted the limb higher. It was clumsy, stiff, but alive. It looked at Daniel, and a sound escaped its lips, a soft, trembling sound that was almost like laughter. The bond. The moment struck Daniel deep. He had built machines for years. He had seen engines roar, drones fly, and weapons fire, but never had anything he made looked back at him with such gratitude. The child reached out with the new hand and touched his arm. The grip was weak, but the meaning was clear. Daniel's throat tightened. "You're welcome," he whispered. For a long moment there was silence between them. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of understanding. Two beings from different worlds bound by one choice, to save instead of abandon. The ominous sign, but the peace did not last. The ground trembled slightly. A low hum filled the air, distant but growing louder. Daniel frowned. He stepped outside and looked at the sky. Above the dark horizon, lights flickered. Shapes moved among the stars, large shapes descending. A chill ran through him. Inside the workshop, the child stirred nervously. its glowing skin dimmed. It whispered a single word in a broken, fragile voice. "Queen." Daniel froze. He looked at the child, then at the sky again. Something was coming. Something far larger than he had imagined, and this was only the beginning. The night outside the colony was no longer quiet. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway of his workshop, his eyes fixed on the horizon where lights danced against the stars. At first he thought it might be patrol ships or cargo freighters passing by, but no ordinary vessel moved like that. These shapes were massive, their lights sharp and steady, like watchful eyes staring down from the heavens. Behind him, the alien child stirred, making a small, frightened sound. The sound carried weight, not just pain, but recognition. Daniel turned quickly. The child sat up weakly, its glowing skin dimmed to a pale shimmer. Its strange new limb twitched and shuddered, not yet steady, but it lifted it anyway and pointed upward toward the sky. The child whispered one word. His ears struggled to catch it. The voice was fragile, yet the meaning was clear. "Queen." Daniel's stomach tightened. He had heard many words in alien tongues before, but this one needed no translation. A queen was not just royalty. A queen was power, command, authority. Whoever this child belonged to, they would not be alone. The humming grew louder. The colony's walls shook lightly, tools rattled against the tables, and the faint dust outside swirled into restless spirals. Daniel shut the door, his mind racing. He looked back at the child, who now clutched its new mechanical arm to its chest as though ashamed or afraid of it. Its wide eyes glistened in the workshop's dim light, and for the first time, Daniel felt a pulse of fear that was not his own but shared between them. He crouched beside the table and spoke softly, though he knew the child could not fully understand. "Who is she? Why is she coming here?" The child said nothing. Its lips moved, trembling, as if trying to form words that would not come. Daniel clenched his jaw and looked at the ceiling as though answers might fall from it. This was more than a rescue. This was a storm rolling in, and he had no shelter strong enough to stand against it. The colony alarms did not sound. The defense towers did not activate. That silence was more frightening than any warning. If the system had not recognized the ships, it meant they were cloaked or far beyond human understanding. He realized, with a deep sinking in his chest, that the colony was blind to what was descending. Only he and this fragile child seemed to know. The workshop lights flickered as another vibration rumbled through the ground. Dust fell from the rafters. The child whimpered and covered its ears. Daniel quickly pulled a blanket over it, not to hide the arm, but to shield the child, as though protection from cloth could matter against whatever force was arriving. The man paced. His thoughts spiraled. If this was the child of royalty, then finding it injured near the colony was no accident. Someone had chased it, someone had harmed it, and now someone powerful was coming to claim it. Was the queen here for revenge? Or to rescue? And what would she do if she found that a human had dared to attach metal to her child's flesh? Daniel felt his breath shorten. The decision he made hours ago, to save the life of something fragile and strange, was now heavier than any weight he had ever carried. His choice might not just change one life. It might decide the fate of everyone in the colony. The humming stopped. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. Daniel rushed to the window and dared to look. Beyond the fields, at the far edge of the settlement, shadows moved against the land. A massive shape, dark and smooth, settled down without a sound. It dwarfed the human buildings, sleek and alien in design, like a mountain that had fallen from the sky. A ramp extended. Thin light spilled across the ground. Figures emerged, tall and armored, their silhouettes sharp and menacing under the strange glow. They moved with perfect coordination, every step echoing control. Daniel's mouth went dry. Soldiers. Not visitors. Not explorers, soldiers. The child sat up again, its new limb trembling as it clutched the edge of the table. Its glowing eyes locked on the doorway, on the direction of the ship. The small body shook, but its gaze was steady, as though it already knew who was coming. Daniel whispered harshly, "Stay here. Don't move." He grabbed a heavy wrench from his bench. His hands shook, but he gripped it like a weapon, though deep inside he knew it would mean nothing if those soldiers entered. The figures spread out, scanning the area, weapons in hand. Their helmets glowed faintly, and their voices carried strange metallic tones. Daniel ducked behind the doorway, heart slamming in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, but he couldn't. The child was in his workshop, and they were clearly searching for it. Then, the sound came, a deeper voice, one that made the air vibrate in Daniel's chest. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't harsh, but it carried power, the kind that made every other sound fade. The soldiers stopped moving. They stepped aside, forming a path. A tall figure descended the ramp slowly, each step deliberate, each movement graceful yet heavy with command. The light touched her and Daniel's breath caught. She was different from the others. Taller, her form draped in armor that shimmered with patterns like flowing rivers. A crown-like structure extended from her head, glowing softly, marking her not as soldier but as ruler. Her eyes glowed brighter than the rest, piercing, scanning, seeing everything. The Queen. Daniel's grip tightened on the wrench until his knuckles whitened. He stepped back, his mind racing with the impossible reality. Inside, the child whispered again, voice broken but filled with certainty. Queen. And Daniel understood then that nothing in his life had prepared him for what was about to happen. The air was heavy as the soldiers marched closer, their footsteps quiet but full of weight. Daniel could hear the hum of their armor, a low vibration like electricity running through metal. He pressed his back against the wooden frame of the workshop door, gripping the wrench so tightly that his hand began to ache. Inside, the alien child shifted nervously. Its glowing skin pulsed faintly, fading in and out like a weak heartbeat. The new mechanical arm twitched as if it too sensed the danger outside. The child's wide eyes never left the doorway, never blinked. It was waiting for something inevitable. Daniel risked another glance. The soldiers had formed a circle around the front of the settlement. Their weapons, strange and sleek, pointed downward but ready to rise at a single command. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. Their silence was more frightening than a battle cry. Then she stepped forward. The Queen's presence was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. She did not rush, she did not stumble. Every movement was measured, deliberate, as though the world itself bent to her pace. Her armor shimmered with a faint glow, patterns sliding across its surface like liquid silver. Her crown extended upward in sharp arcs, glowing faintly with alien energy. Her eyes, bright and sharp, scanned the settlement. When they landed on the workshop, Daniel felt his stomach drop. She knew. Somehow, even without entering, she knew her child was inside. The soldiers parted instantly, creating a path for her as though the ground itself demanded she not be obstructed. Daniel ducked back into the workshop, chest tight, breath quick. His instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, but his legs refused to move. He looked at the child instead. The child's small body shook, not from pain this time, but from something deeper. Recognition, fear, yet there was also relief. The way its glowing eyes softened, the way its trembling slowed. It was like a lost traveler seeing home on the horizon. Daniel crouched next to it. "She's here for you, isn't she?" he whispered, though he knew the child couldn't understand. Or maybe it could. Its head dipped slightly, a small, slow nod. The ground trembled softly as the Queen approached. A shadow stretched across the workshop's doorway. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest, each beat louder than the last. He stood, the wrench still in his hand, though he knew it was nothing more than a symbol of resistance. The doorway filled with her presence. She did not step inside right away. She stood tall, her glowing eyes piercing through the dim workshop, first landing on Daniel, then on the child behind him. The silence stretched. Daniel felt sweat drip down his temple. He wanted to speak, but the words caught in his throat. What could he possibly say to a queen from another world? The child broke the silence. A soft cry escaped its lips, a sound so small against the vast silence that it seemed almost out of place. The Queen's head turned slightly at the sound, her glowing eyes softening. She stepped inside. The soldiers remained outside, motionless statues guarding the entrance. Only she entered. The workshop felt smaller with her in it, every shadow bending away from her presence. Daniel stepped instinctively in front of the child, raising the wrench like a shield. His voice shook when he finally spoke. I helped it. Don't hurt me, please." The Queen did not answer. She moved closer, her gaze fixed on the child. Daniel's hands trembled. He expected her to strike him down, to call her soldiers inside. But instead, she stopped beside the table and lowered herself slowly, gracefully, until she was at eye level with the child. The child's glowing skin brightened faintly. Its mechanical arm twitched and then it reached out toward her, The queen's eyes moved to the limb. For a moment, her expression was unreadable. She touched it gently, her long fingers brushing the metal where it joined the flesh. Daniel held his breath. This was the moment. If she saw it as an insult, as a violation, he was finished. The colony might be finished. But she did not recoil. She did not strike. Instead, she tested the arm, moving the fingers, bending the elbow. The child allowed it, watching her carefully. When the arm closed into a fist and then opened again, the queen's eyes glowed brighter, almost shimmering with something Daniel could not believe. Approval. She looked at him then. Her gaze was sharp like a blade, but it was not filled with hate. It was curious, measured, respectful even. Daniel swallowed hard. I didn't know what else to do. It was dying. His words trailed off. He had no way to explain in their language, but his tone carried the truth. He had saved the child because he could not let it die. The queen rose to her full height again. For a long moment she stood in silence, staring at Daniel. He felt like she could see every thought in his mind, every doubt, every fear, every choice. Then, without warning, she raised her hand slightly. The soldiers outside shifted but did not enter. Instead, they lowered their weapons. Daniel blinked, stunned. He looked at the queen again. She gave the faintest nod. Not of thanks, not yet, but of recognition. The child clutched its new limb and smiled faintly, the first true smile since Daniel had found it. The queen turned and began to walk toward the door. The message was clear. She did not come to destroy. She had come to see. And Daniel realized, as he let the wrench slip from his shaking hand, that everything had changed the moment he built that arm. The queen's presence lingered in the workshop like a shadow that could not be shaken off. She had not spoken a word, yet Daniel felt as though she had already passed judgment in silence. The soldiers outside remained still, their formation unbroken, as if they too were waiting for a command that had not yet come. Daniel stood frozen, his back damp with sweat, his hands twitching at his sides. His wrench lay abandoned on the floor, its weight useless against the kind of power that now stood before him. The queen's glowing eyes moved slowly between him and her child, and Daniel could feel the sharpness of her gaze cutting through every thought he tried to hold steady. The child reached toward her again, its new mechanical arm jerking awkwardly as the motors whirred softly. The queen's gaze fell on the limb once more. For a few tense seconds, Daniel thought she would strike it away, tear it off, and declare his work a crime. Instead, she touched it gently again, testing the strength in its fingers, the flexibility of its joints. The child tried to flex the hand, and though the movement was stiff, the fingers obeyed. The small glow in the child's skin brightened in excitement. The queen's expression did not change, but Daniel saw something shift in her eyes, something softer, almost invisible, but there. She turned to him then. Daniel's breath caught. Her voice came finally low and resonant, vibrating in the air as if carried through every surface of the room. He did not understand her words, not truly, but the tone was clear. A demand. An explanation. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his voice shaking but steady enough to carry meaning. It was dying, he said, pointing to the child. Your child. I couldn't let it die. I built this so it could live. The queen's head tilted slightly, her eyes narrowing. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the child again, who now raised the new limb proudly, almost showing it off. It was not perfect, it shook, the grip weak, the movement stiff, but it was alive, and the child's eyes glowed brighter with each attempt. The queen raised her hand, and the soldiers outside moved at once. Two stepped forward into the workshop, their weapons lowered but ready. Daniel stiffened, his chest tightening. Were they here to take him away, to end him quietly with no trial, no mercy? One soldier moved toward him, another toward the child. The queen's gaze never left Daniel. He took a step back, his breath ragged. No, he whispered, though his voice carried no strength. Don't hurt it, please take me if you have to, but don't hurt it. The soldier stopped. The queen lifted her hand again, and the motion froze the entire room. The soldiers obeyed instantly, stepping back. She had not spoken, yet her command was absolute. Daniel felt his knees weaken. She looked at him once more, her glowing eyes narrowing in thought. Then, slowly, she lowered herself to one knee beside the child again. The air in the room felt heavier, like a storm pressing down, but the queen did not strike. She placed her hand on the child's chest and whispered a sound that made the child relax immediately, leaning into her touch. Then her eyes shifted back to Daniel. She raised her hand and gestured toward him. The child followed her motion, turning its gaze to him as well. The queen spoke again, slower this time, her tone softer as if she wanted him to understand. Though the words were alien, Daniel felt the meaning settle in his chest. She had seen what he had done and she recognized it. The child reached out with the new arm again and touched Daniel's hand. The queen allowed it. She did not stop it. Daniel exhaled a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. His throat tightened with a strange mix of relief and disbelief. She had not punished him. She had not destroyed him. Instead, she had allowed her child to accept his gift, but the judgment was not over. The queen stood, her towering form filling the workshop once again. She spoke loudly this time, her voice carrying through the walls, reaching the soldiers outside. They shifted, responding instantly, as though her words were commands that could move armies. Then she looked at Daniel once more, her eyes glowing brighter than before. She did not bow, did not smile, but she gave the faintest nod, a gesture so small it might have been missed if Daniel had blinked. Yet to him it was larger than anything he had ever known. The soldiers lowered their weapons fully. Their stance changed from threat to guard, from hunters to protectors. Daniel realized then that her judgment was not just for him, but for the entire colony. His choice to save the child had shifted something greater than he could imagine. The queen turned, her cloak of light shimmering as she stepped toward the door. The soldiers parted immediately, forming a path once again. The child looked at Daniel one last time before following her, the new limb swinging awkwardly but proudly at its side. Daniel stood in silence, his chest heavy with the weight of what had just passed. He had been measured by the queen of an alien race, and though she had not spoken his language, her verdict was clear. He was not condemned. He was acknowledged, and somewhere deep inside, Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The colony held its breath. No alarms rang, no soldiers fired, no orders of destruction came. The queen's ship stood silently at the edge of the settlement, a mountain of dark steel and light, its shadow swallowing the fields. The soldiers remained still, forming a perfect line outside Daniel's workshop. They were no longer hunters. They were waiting. Waiting for her decision. Inside, Daniel leaned against the table, his knees weak. He had not been killed. His workshop had not been torn apart. The queen had left without a single strike, but her presence lingered like a weight pressing down on him. He tried to steady his breathing, but his thoughts raced. Was it over? Or had she simply delayed the punishment? The alien child still sat on the table, its mechanical arm twitching as it learned to control the fingers. The glow on its skin pulsed softly, no longer dim with fear. Daniel watched it, wondering how something so small could bring so much danger and yet so much meaning. A sound broke the silence. The ground trembled slightly, not with the heavy steps of soldiers but with something else. Daniel looked toward the door. Shadows moved again. This time the queen returned. She stepped inside alone, her towering form bending slightly to clear the frame. Her soldiers did not follow. It was just her child, and Daniel. Daniel's heart raced again. He forced himself to stand straighter even though his legs shook. He could not run. He could not hide. The queen's eyes glowed brighter in the dim light. She looked at her child first, then at the metal limb, and then at Daniel. There was silence, but it did not feel like before. This silence carried weight, the kind of silence before something irreversible is spoken. Her voice came, low and deep, each word humming in the air. Daniel could not understand the language, but he understood the tone. It was not anger. It was not threat. It was something else. The child responded, speaking quickly, pointing with its new arm, showing her how the fingers opened and closed. The queen reached down, tested it once more, and then looked back at Daniel, and then, to his shock, she lowered herself to one knee. Daniel's breath caught. His mind could not process what he was seeing. A queen, a ruler of soldiers and ships, lowering herself in front of him. It was not submission, not weakness, it was respect. Her eyes locked on his, and she spoke again. This time the tone was softer, almost human in its warmth. Though he could not understand the words, he felt the meaning. Gratitude. Recognition. The child pressed its hand against Daniel's, their fingers locking awkwardly, metal against flesh. The queen allowed it. She even placed her own hand gently over theirs as though sealing the moment. Daniel swallowed hard, his voice breaking as he whispered, "I only wanted to help, that's all." The Queen stood again, taller than anyone he had ever faced, yet now her presence felt different. The sharpness in her eyes had softened. She raised one hand, and outside the soldiers shifted. Their weapons retracted. Their stance changed completely. They were no longer preparing for war. They were standing guard, but not against him. The Queen turned to the child and spoke again. The child's glowing skin pulsed brightly, almost joyfully. It nodded quickly, then looked at Daniel with a smile so wide and genuine that it felt like light breaking through a storm. Daniel's chest tightened. This was the twist he had not expected. He had feared death, destruction, the end of everything. Instead, he had earned something greater, respect from a people who had no reason to offer it. The Queen moved toward the doorway. Before leaving, she turned back one final time. Her eyes met his again, and this time she gave him the smallest gesture. Her hand placed against her chest, then lowered slowly. He did not know the gesture, but the meaning was clear. A promise. A bond. When she stepped outside, the soldiers followed her motion, lowering themselves slightly as she passed. Their discipline was absolute, but even they seemed to have shifted. They looked at him not with hostility, but with acknowledgement. Daniel stood frozen as the ship's lights grew brighter. The Queen and her child boarded, the soldiers moving with them in perfect formation. The ramp closed slowly, the glow fading as the massive vessel prepared to lift. For a long moment, the colony was silent, watching the impossible unfold. Daniel's fellow settlers had gathered at a distance, staring wide-eyed at the scene they had not dared to interfere in. When the ship finally rose into the night sky, disappearing among the stars, only then did the air seem to return to their lungs. Daniel remained by his workshop door, staring at the empty sky. His heart was heavy, but not with fear anymore. Something else filled it, a strange mixture of relief, pride, and awe. He had not saved a life for reward. He had done it because he could not turn away. But his act of compassion had changed something vast, something no human had ever touched before. The others approached him slowly, asking questions, whispering, trying to understand. But Daniel had no answers to give. He only knew this. That night he had built more than a mechanical arm. He had built a bridge between worlds, and though the Queen had left, he knew deep inside that this was not the end. She would remember. She would return. The colony did not sleep after that night. People whispered in the streets. Lights burned late in the windows, and every shadow in the sky made them look upward in fear and wonder. A queen had arrived, and then she had left without a single word of war. No alarms, no destruction, only silence, and one human standing at the center of it. Daniel stayed in his workshop. He had cleaned the tools, swept the floor, and repaired the table where the alien child had rested, but his mind refused to settle. Every detail of that night replayed endlessly. The Queen's glowing eyes, her soldiers standing in perfect silence, the child's small smile as it raised the metal limb. He told himself it was over. They had left. His part was finished, but deep down he knew better. The nod, the gesture she had given, the look in her eyes, it was not the end. It was a promise. 3 days passed before the sky opened again. It began with a hum, soft at first, then rolling like thunder across the fields. The colonists ran to the walls, eyes wide, hands trembling. Daniel walked outside too, his chest tight with both dread and expectation. From the clouds above, light poured down. The Queen's ship returned, its shadow stretching across the colony. Soldiers descended first, forming their silent circle once again, but this time no weapons were raised. Their stance was protective, not hostile, as though they guarded something greater than themselves. And then she came. The Queen walked down the ramp with the same deliberate steps, her presence still heavy, still commanding, but there was something different in the air this time. It was not tension. It was anticipation. Behind her walked the child, moving more steadily now, the mechanical arm swinging with a new kind of confidence. The colonists stepped back in fear, but Daniel did not. He stayed where he was, heart pounding as the Queen's gaze found him immediately. She did not look at the others. Only at him. She approached, the child following close. When she stopped before him, the world seemed to hold its breath. The soldiers around them remained motionless, waiting for her voice. The Queen spoke, her words deep and resonant, echoing across the open ground. Daniel could not understand the language, but her tone was steady, almost warm. The child stepped forward and raised its arm, showing the colony what Daniel had built. The glow of its skin pulsed bright, full of life. Daniel felt every eye in the colony on him. Fear, confusion, awe. None of them knew what was happening, but they all understood one thing: this was no threat. This was recognition. The Queen raised her hand, palm open, and then lowered it toward him. The soldiers mirrored the gesture, a movement that seemed ritual, sacred. Daniel stood frozen, not knowing what it meant until the child grabbed his hand again and pressed it against its chest. And then the Queen spoke once more, slower this time. She touched her chest and pointed to Daniel. She touched the child's chest, then pointed to him again. Her glowing eyes never left his. The meaning was clear. He was no longer a stranger. He was bound to them. A murmur rippled through the colony. Some whispered in fear, others in awe. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had not asked for this. He had not planned it. But the choice he made that night to save a single life had become something far greater. The Queen turned, raising her voice to her soldiers. They moved instantly, forming a new circle, not of war but of unity. The child clutched Daniel's hand tightly and refused to let go. The Queen did not stop it. Instead, she allowed it, her expression unreadable but her silence full of meaning. When she finally spoke again, Daniel felt the weight of history in her voice. He did not know the words, but he knew their truth. A new path had been chosen. The ship's lights glowed brighter, not as a weapon, but as a beacon. The soldiers' formation shifted, their weapons sealed away. The child lifted its mechanical arm high, showing it proudly to its people, to the humans, to the sky itself. And in that moment, Daniel understood. His creation was not just metal and wires. It was proof. Proof that compassion could bridge what war could not. That humans were more than fragile bodies on a distant world. They were makers. They were protectors. They were something the Queen herself could respect. She turned back to him one last time, her eyes locked with his, glowing fiercely. Then she placed her hand against her chest again, slower, deeper than before, a promise carved into silence. The child smiled at him, brighter than ever, and Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle into his bones. This was no ending. This was the beginning of something new. An alliance, a family, a story larger than any one human could imagine. As the ship rose once more, leaving the colony behind, Daniel knew the Queen would return. Not as a threat, not as a conqueror, but as a partner. And the world would never be the same again.